There's an ancient saying, if you meet Buddha on the road, kill him. Of course, this means that as you continuously meet your own ideas about what you think Buddha was talking about, or who he was, or what he really meant by what he said, kill those ideas. Just drop them. Learn to identify them as something that isn't written in stone. You don't know. Years ago, I ended up with a Japanese exchange student in my house. I was kind of rescuing her from an overly Christian household that was trying to convert her. I was very curious about her perspective because she had been raised as a Buddhist, as an actual Buddhist, not as us, American, young hippie, pretend to be Buddhists. So I really wanted to know, and I asked her, what's the difference between Christianity and Buddhism? I thought she was going to give me some sort of a thing about, well, Christians think when you die you go to heaven or hell, and Buddhists are looking for enlightenment. I thought she was going to give me this big philosophical thing, and she just looked at me and said, we don't care about Buddha. That one little statement right there just cuts right through the noise of the ideas and concepts that we put on enlightenment. And it has gotten really thick around here, hasn't it? One of the things we need to keep in mind is that Buddha was a prince. He came from a very hierarchical society, extremely hierarchical society, extremely male-dominated as well. He was a conqueror in his land many, many years ago. His people had conquered the land, and they were using the slave labor of the indigenous people there to create their wealth. He had no idea about that. He just grew up a prince. What did he know, right? He was totally pampered. He was taken care of. Everything he wanted was given to him. Even a wife was given to him. Then one day he escaped. He wanted to go out. So he went out and he's walking around and he started seeing how all the other people lived. He saw poverty, he saw disease, he saw old age, and it broke him. Because he went from totally naive to seeing all this stuff that he had no context for. Siddhartha, our young man, was a Hindu. And the Hindu belief system is all about enlightenment, with the idea that attaining enlightenment is practically impossible to do, but you can do it through really strict asceticism and all sorts of things like that. So he heads off to the woods, and that's what he does. But note, instead, here he was a prince. Instead of trying to do something about the poverty and disease and despair that he found in his people, he was 100% focused on his own feelings about it, how it made him feel bad. So the whole context of what Buddha did was so that he would feel better. It's not his fault. This is the context, the worldview that he lived in. And stepping out of your worldview, I believe, requires someone from another worldview to show you. Because otherwise in that, we're just stuck in the loops inside of our own heads. But the area where Buddha was living, he didn't have access to any indigenous elders, to actual tribes that were living free on the land, because it had been conquered so long ago. They had completely lost the plot. The entire culture was living in a broken story, living in a story of self, living in a story of separation. But enlightenment itself is stepping beyond this separation, right? Once Buddha actually achieved his enlightenment, then he taught how to achieve enlightenment within his own worldview, the worldview of the conqueror. Again, he didn't turn towards protecting people around him. He didn't allow women into his monasteries. That goes to show how far he was from true story, how deep he was into the broken story of male dominance and hierarchy and all those things. So this came along and along and along through Buddhism all the way up until the modern times. So you and I, here in the Western modern world, also living in a society of conquerors and dominance and hierarchy. When we encountered Buddhism, we met hierarchy with hierarchy. We met the idea of individual enlightenment with the idea of individual enlightenment. We literally just turned the original sin of Christianity into the "you are unenlightened and probably will never get out of it" idea of Eastern religions. I remember when I was like about 13 years old. I'd been raised very, very, very Catholic, and I managed to get a hold of a few books about Buddhism. This was way back in the dark ages when TV was black and white. I mean, like literally. We didn't have this huge spiritual marketplace that we have today. It was actually kind of difficult to find a book on Buddhism, and they were kind of very dry and, nothing like what we have circulating now. So I got this book and I'm reading about Buddhism, and it started talking about enlightenment. And my 13-year-old, commercialized brain heard this story, and my thought was, that's a way better deal. I'm going for that one. Because in Christianity, in order to go to heaven, you have to die. And it's kind of like a crapshoot. You have no idea your whole life whether you're going to make it or not. I mean, you could be good, and then do one thing stupid and then die and bam, you're in hell, right? So my brain interpreted this as, that's a way better deal. But for some reason, I didn't pick up the impossibility of it. I picked up I was just determined. Inside myself, I was like, that's a way better deal. I'm going to do that. Right? So somehow or another, I killed the Buddha before I had even met him. Meanwhile, we've had what we're calling an East meets West of spirituality, and we are not better for it. Our confusion level has gone through the roof because we have completely taken our consumerism mentality and turned it into these false ideas that we think that Buddha was. We have not been killing Buddha out on the road at all. We're taking all of those ideas and just turning it into a commercial marketplace of self-aggrandizement. One of our big clues that Buddha himself and the religion that grew from him was hierarchical and patriarchal was the fact that he didn't allow women in. This just shows that there was no real indigenous roots to what he was doing. Again, not his fault. That is the society that he was in. That is the whole language that he knew. But he didn't want women in at all. He had to be begged by his stepmother and people in the community to allow women in. He finally relented and put more onerous rules on the women designed to keep the women from being women. They had to be very, very male-like to endure this, because women are about babies and children and community and family and food. He turned them into rule followers in his strict monastic lifestyle. And he made us the enemy. You can still see this in any sort of discussion with Buddhist-minded people about this, because you bring it up and men will say things like, oh, we can't have women because they interrupt our meditation. Our desire for them is just too much. Literally, we are the thing that keeps them from attaining their enlightenment. This is not balanced. This is irreparable, really. So here's one of the jokes that I like to make. And I am surprised that I make this joke all the time, groups of people. Nobody gets it. Nobody thinks it's funny. But I'm going to share it anyway. I always say, what if Buddha had actually allowed women in? What would have happened? Answer: there would have been babies everywhere. There would have been aunties everywhere. People would have turned into uncles. People would have been grandparents. There would be children. There would be dirt. There would be mess. There would be laughter. There would be community. There would be togetherness. There would be fully developed right brains. There would be the possibility of simply balancing the human body, spirit, mind, so that everyone lived in an enlightened state. There would have been babies. One final point, and this one is important. Enlightenment is the tool that is necessary to bring the divided mind back to unity. As Buddha has showed us, you can become fully enlightened. There's no question. Was he fully enlightened? Yes, of course he was. You can be fully enlightened within a broken culture. And you're going to stay, basically living within the rules of that culture and the ideas of that culture. But an enlightened person actually has the ability to listen to other options and start stepping out of it. Way back in the day, Buddha, he didn't live in a integrated society of any kind. The land had been conquered for so long, and his caste of people were the bosses, and then you had this level of people and that level of people, and the society kind of hummed along with this, but there wasn't a whole lot of interruption and ideas that came from other places filtering in. You and I do not live in that land. Yes, we live in a very hierarchical, male-dominated society, but we have so many stories to listen to, and we have new ways to conceive of how the human being works with our left brain, our right brain, with all of the science that we're starting to get about how women live and operate, and with all of the stories that are coming to us from indigenous cultures, that an enlightened person today can radically step out of their worldview. I think you can't really step out of your worldview without breaking your addiction to your speaking mind. And that's what enlightenment is. At least you're not addicted to that, and now you can listen and hear. One other thing that Buddha never figured out was that everything is conscious. I mean, he figured out the total unity of all consciousness, but I don't think he figured out that water was alive, that water was living. I don't think he figured out that all of the animals and the plants are our relations. I don't think he figured out that it's possible to live in complete harmony with all the conscious beings, because he probably still thought only human beings were conscious. You have to be able to listen. I think that there has to be an actual connection of the actual people to the land as intimate as living in your food system. So if you're living in any sort of agricultural society at all where your food comes from somewhere else, and people don't have to live in huge cooperative communes and communities just in order to eat, then you're not going to have that connection with the land where you're going to be able to hear the voices coming to you. I don't think Buddha could talk to a tree. I don't think Buddha bothered ever sitting down and talking to a rock or listening to the ants and the stories they were telling, because he didn't need to. He could just sit there and teach to his community, and, the food bringers, the women, would bring him food and take care of him and his community and everybody. Sidebar, he didn't let women into the monastery, right? He sure as heck let them feed him. We live in an amazingly alive world. And it's breaking with the domination of our left brain, breaking with the domination of the language that's in our head, that's critical in order to be able to start listening with our full soul, to be able to listen with our right brain, to be able to bring that right brain back into harmony so that we're an integrated human being living here on a living earth, surrounded by all the relations of the earth. So the final message is that keep searching for enlightenment. Stop thinking that it's hard to get. It's your birthright. You need to get there so that you can join the rest of us. And if I have any message at all to the indigenous world out there, is to know that this is a tool that us conquered people can use to actually come back to harmony with everything. And particularly when we come back into the stories that you are painting for us of what it's like to be a natural, awake, community-driven human being. We can use this tool to bring us all there to know that the shift is possible. it's possible to fall out of the conquered mind and into the cooperative mind.